So today we have a lot to talk about and we're really excited about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is generative AI, why does UX research care, and then how we can help define Gen AI in enterprise settings, the role of UX research when we look at it in AI, and then some more applied learnings of Hayley will walk us through what it looks like at ServiceNow going through a study, and then recommendations and takeaways for all of you to walk away with. And so what you will get to walk away from is, today you're going to get an overview of generative AI in enterprise and where UX research fits in. Some unique considerations. So if you haven't necessarily done UX research for AI, things to really consider when you're helping create generative AI experiences. An example of a deep dive of a human-centered AI principles to create a meaningful experience for an agent. When I say an agent, I mean someone who helps resolve a ticket or case or incident if you have an issue. And then top takeaways that you get to walk away with. So if you start to create generative AI experiences for in your product or company. One quick call out, because we get lots of these questions. We're not today focusing on how UX researchers can use and apply generative AI tools in the field. Great topic, really interesting, just not what we're doing today. So first, why are we even talking about AI and UX research? So we want to take a framing in a way and say right now it kind of feels like maybe the only constant is change. Things are moving fast. AI technology is rapidly evolving. And there are current constraints with the way the technology is right now. For example, some of the inaccurate content, the time it can take to load, things like this that inform people's experience. But those constraints may not and likely will not be the same constraints of tomorrow. Things are moving really quickly. In fact, we did a study that was only about 10 to 11 months apart with agents. So again, those people helping resolve tickets and cases. And this was a general population, about 200 agents. And in just the 11 months from, like, I think it was February last year, 2023, to December, January this year, we found that only 40% had even been aware of generative AI tools like ChatGPT, Bard, et cetera. And that jumped to over 90% reporting using generative AI tools. And important in enterprise, 60% are using them in work as well. So this is coming. People are using it. They're experimenting. And it's really critical for UX research to be involved. And that's why we want to emphasize that here, is that sometimes it may feel overwhelming or daunting. I know there's a lot of mixed feelings right now in the UX research community about what's happening with generative AI for themselves personally, as well as for what it means for their users. And we want to say, this is where UX research really plays such an important pivotal role, because you are the closest to your user and you can see how quickly expectations are changing, how quickly experiences and exposure is changing. You are the closest to your user and get to represent to your product teams and bring in that perspective. And it's really important and pivotal to do. And the other good thing is there are known UX research best practices that you can use to help navigate through this place. So all the skills you already have, they still apply. There's just some different considerations to think through when you start to bring in AI. And so let's do a very quick level set for anyone who's not familiar with it on what generative AI is. We're going to take a step back and say there's traditional or classic AI, which has been around for a very long time. Some people say AI is the oldest new technology. AI is not brand new. It may feel like it with generative AI bursting onto the scene with about a year, 2 years ago, but it's not. And so I want to say traditional or classic AI is really, really good at patterns and recognizing patterns. And it gets trained on data to make these predictions. So one way to think about it is assembling a jigsaw puzzle into a known piece of art. It can predict what that next piece is really, really well because it learns. However, it does not generate and create net new content. That's what generative AI does. So its name is quite telling. It generates new content, including images, text, code, workflows, all sorts of different modalities. And it also learns from data to generate these novel outputs. So the image here, that we like to think of it kind of like painting on a blank canvas. And like an artist who also is informed by their experiences or their data inputs. Generative AI is also greatly informed by what data it's trained on, and it'll influence what it ends up creating and making. And what's really interesting with generative AI is it does produce this really realistic and coherent content. And one of the things that sets aside is it uses natural language. So if any of you have explored with any of the tools like ChatGPT, DALL-E, et cetera, you use your natural language and put in what's called a prompt to tell it what you want it to do and generate. And that is a shift we've seen from classic AI to generative AI. So again, very quick distinction we're making. Here's some example modalities. I'm not going to go into any detail. I just want to point out there are a lot of things it can generate. And it's not limited to just text or conversation, even though we may see those a lot, or images may be top of mind. There's a lot more it can do. And as it's evolving, we're going to see even more examples of modalities coming out as well, and mixed modalities too. That's important for you as a UX researcher to know what these different ones are, to understand when you think about your user, what makes sense to bring in for them? What do they need to have at their fingertips, maybe? And that's where, again, we're going to fit in UX research. So one of the framings that we like to use is that, first and foremost, generative AI has to deliver value to both the organizations and the users. You're going to hear us talk about value a lot. I'm sorry. Trust and value. You're going to hear it a lot. And they are intermingled as well. So if in order for organizations to achieve their value goals as well, cost reduction, let's say, then we need to make sure that the experience we bring to our users is actually bringing value to them and that they can trust it over time too. So this is one of our kind of framing things we're going to keep talking about, is that the AI experience needs to actually solve a real world problem and, again, bring value to the person using it in some way. And it's, like I said, it's coming. So this was a recent study that showed that 38% of the IT professionals were already implementing in some way generative AI at their enterprise company, and 42% were still exploring it, but it's on their roadmap, right? Gartner estimates that more than 80% of the enterprises will have implemented or deployed generative AI by 2026. So this is big. And what's great is, again, there's a huge role for UX research to play in this because it is more of an unknown in many ways, and it is changing quickly. So UX research is really pivotal. And there are a lot of use cases. These are only 9 of so many. I'm only going to talk about 3 of them really quickly that we're kind of exploring more recently in conversations here. So code generation, like for developers. Product development, which can even fall into helping developers too, like creating applications or on the more product management side of it. And then customer support. You'll hear a deep dive example from Hayley on that, going back to our agents who help solve people's cases and incidents. But there are a lot to do. And it's important for you to remember what these use cases are again and where they might fit in to help your users and really deliver the most value. And then it's also critical because to most people at the end of the day, I don't know if you've had many conversations with people who maybe aren't as closely in sync with where generative AI is. AI just needs to help them complete their task. It needs to help them solve a problem. It needs to help make time for them to do what they want to do, whether it's at work to focus on more meaningful things instead of mundane tasks, or in their personal life so they can go spend time with their families or whatever really matters to them. And so that's what AI needs to do. And even knowing the difference between AI and generative AI, that may not matter much to the person. Knowing it's AI, that's important. The exact type of model on the back end, that is probably less important because they just need to know it's helping them and then understand how they can get value from it and trust it. So that comes to what's it like when we conduct UX research for generative AI experiences. First, I will say the cross-functional collaboration is next level and critical. This is just some of the people we just came up with on the top of our heads of who we work closely with when we are doing UX research when it comes to generative AI. You can see there's a ton of different people with a lot of different lens and expertise they're going to bring. So what's the role for UX research to bring? For us, we think there's a lot we can do that focuses on the user. So 3 of them here are all about kind of the user and the human and solving real world problems. And then 1 of them is more about you. So learning, being curious, asking questions. This is, of course, in service of your user as well. But you do need to take the initiative to learn as well, understand a little bit about the different capabilities and what some of the implications are, where are some of the trade-offs for it, what could go wrong with it. These are things we do need to think through, and it's a really great opportunity to use I think most UX researchers I know are naturally curious and inquisitive. So leverage that, lean into that. Asking questions, especially to your diverse cross-functional team, is really important. I'm not going to go into detail with all these because Hayley is going to do that for you later. But these are kind of what we say, this is what UX research is bringing. And again, really representing that human user view. You're the #1 champion, I think, for it. And then you partner with your team to make it a reality. We want to, again, emphasize, avoid AI for AI's sake. Sometimes people are like, just sprinkle some AI on it. It's going to make it really cool. Don't do that. You can, again, position it and champion your user. Is this really solving something for them? Is what we're proposing, bringing AI into, actually going to slow them down? Is it going to lose their trust? Are they not going to use it? Is it going to cause other issues? That's a great thing for you to help solve for and bring to the forefront. And so this is from Nielsen Norma Group. We'll have a whole link of resources as well. But finding that appropriate solution where it makes sense within where the technology is today and where users are today and their user journey is really important. But there are unique risks of AI to consider. There's a lot. We're just going to go through 3 kind of bigger ones that are very top of mind right now. So the first is data security. We're seeing this come as concerns for people across all different user groups. So from end users, let's say like if I'm using ChatGPT, maybe I'm worried about what they're doing with the data. So I'm going to modify what I put in and use. For example, I would never put in any customer data or, PII, anything like that, because I don't know what's going to be happening with it. So from the end of the user all the way to the buyers who are making the decisions of what they want to use and buy, how secure is it? How do they know? How do they then build their data governance and responsible AI? All of these things are really top of mind. And then ultimately for your product team, needs to really be paying attention to this because it matters to all these different users. So it's a really important one to start thinking about and having conversations about. Related is data bias. Well, first of all, the data will never be perfectly representative of every single person. That's pretty much impossible. So bias is somewhat unavoidable. And what you can do, though, is be aware of it, know, and then help mitigate it and bring the attention to people to help resolve it too, or the vulnerable populations that may be affected by it. And again, this falls, in our opinion, within the scope of a UX researcher to know and advocate for as well. And this one's more unique to generative AI, inaccurate outputs. Of course, classic AI could be wrong too. It could say the wrong puzzle piece. But it's not going to make up a puzzle. Generative AI could make it up, right? We've heard of hallucinations. And there's a lot in the news with that, a lot of potential consequences we know. But really, the thing that's a takeaway for this is that knowing that it can be inaccurate, and in varying degrees, it could have some misinformation, it could misinterpret something, or it could omit something. These are all different ways it could be inaccurate. And so again, it comes up to trust and knowing your user too. How are you going to acknowledge that for users so they know when and how to use it, and know for your industry and use case as well when it might be really risky to have it. So we see in health, finances, some HR cases, right? It might be really risky for it there. So maybe that's not where we start. Maybe we start with somewhere a little safer where there's less risk. So these are the ones to consider because ultimately they can contribute to a lack of trust. And we know if they don't have trust, then they will not use it and will not get value from it. So we're back to that. And to go into more detail of what we do about this and for our different users, I'm going to pass it to Hayley.
Thank you, Jessa. So when we're creating generative AI experiences in the enterprise, we're going to be working with a ton of different personas. That's just the nature of working in enterprise. We don't always just have one singular end user. And it's up to us to determine what are those unique needs? What are they going to get out of AI? So, there's that down button. User perceptions and expectations of AI differ based on their own unique needs. And us as user researchers, we know this. This is our whole gig. We're all about finding what are the user needs, the pain points, how can we address them? And with all of the different personas that we have in enterprise, there's going to be varying needs and expectations about what AI can do for them, what AI can serve to that end user. So UX researchers are really there to help figure out where AI can help drive the most value for those end users. So I know we've been going into a couple of technical details, and you're probably wondering why there's a man holding a tomato on the screen. And I know that UX researchers love a good metaphor, so stick with me here. We can think of some of our different user groups using a comparison to the different people involved in a crop harvesting process. So stick with me. Oh, I'm so used to wanting to just do this. So we can think of the farmers. These are people that need to have a very in-depth knowledge of the land that they're working, the soil, the climate, what type of pests are typically there, what kind of seeds are they even able to plant. Their whole goal is harvesting a good crop so they can then bring that to a farmer's market and bring it to all of the people. And then we have the farm-to-table chefs. So think about people that work at restaurants that have like $3 signs on Google reviews. They need to know a lot about the products, how they were sourced, seasonality, what's in season, but they don't need to have that same level of knowledge that a farmer does. They just need to know that the crops that they're using are reliable so they can then prepare very consistent, high quality meals. Then we have the home cook. This is someone who has a giant stash of Instagram Reels saved recipes on their phone, and they're just trying to get dinner on the table. So they just want to know whether the ingredient is correct and is it ripe. It's a little bit less of an in-depth knowledge than the chef or the farmer is going to need. So let's bring this back to enterprise. We can sort of think of our groups of personas that we serve here, at least at ServiceNow, as the different levels of understanding and knowledge that our end users need to have around AI. So the farmers, they're sort of like our implementers, the people that are introducing AI in their organization, and those who are responsible for configuring it and deploying it in their workplace. The chefs, they're the ones that are like using it every day. These are the employees that are using generative AI on the job, the ones that are using it every day. They're consuming it and they need it to be reliable. And then we have our home cook, sort of infrequent end users. Again, they just want that reliability. They really can be spared the details here. But across all users, trust is at the center of building an impactful and useful generative AI experience. But trust might look different for that farmer compared to that home chef. There's going to be very different needs depending on who we're building it for. So Jessa actually gave a really great talk also for learners a while ago. It's recorded on YouTube where she goes into these in a lot more depth. But just to give you a quick sense, for control, someone who's going in and developing AI in an organization, they're going to need to know a lot more about the models, the data that was used to build it. They have a lot more control that they're going to have to oversee than someone like an agent who's just deciding whether or not they're going to use an AI prediction or not. So we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive on that sort of middle persona, so someone who's using generative AI in their work to help their tasks. And we've been talking about them a lot, but we're going to come back to this agent persona. And I'll explain a little bit more, but I'm highly confident that we've all interacted with one before. So agents are a really key persona here at ServiceNow. They're one of the personas that we build out for. It's the one area that I tend to focus on, so that's why I'm speaking about it here today. And we've all spoken to an agent before. These are our customer service agents, our IT help desk agents. If you've ever had to request a password reset, or you've ever had to get a refund for something online. These are all agents. We've all interacted with them. They're across every industry under the sun, and they're usually the sort of first point of contact or liaison between a consumer and a larger business. So something I want to remind us again is that we're not building AI for AI. We are building AI to solve a real problem. So something that we did here at ServiceNow when we were building out solutions for agents is we asked ourselves, what is the agent experience? What is it like for an agent to sort of sign in at the beginning of the day? And what are the pain points that they actually face? And where could AI actually go in to address some of these pain points? So the research that actually informed this, it wasn't generative AI research. We were doing ethnographic studies, talking to researchers who already have this expertise. And we were trying to understand, hey, what are some of those pain points that agents face on a daily basis? And what would be most suitable to address with generative AI? So I'll walk you through a couple of them. So agents spend a significant amount of time getting up to speed on a case. So again, I know we've all spoken to a customer service agent at some point. If you've ever been transferred on a call, you have to remember that the person you're being transferred to has to get up to speed on that case. They need to figure out what are the steps that have already been taken, how far along are you in the resolution process. These are all things that they need to figure out while they are supporting you. And that takes a lot of time. And while they're doing that, they're often getting context from a wide variety of sources. Normally they have like 2 monitors, they have a bunch of tabs open, a Teams chat with other agents, an email. They're working on multiple cases at the same time. So they're taking all of this information to help inform them how to best resolve the issue. Not only are they talking to us, the requesters, the people that are putting in the request, they're also talking to each other. So sometimes when there's a big outage or there is the holiday rush and a lot of people are submitting refund orders at the same time, this can be something that the agents are informing each other about, and they're sort of keeping each other in the loop on like a Teams chat. So we have to remember that they're sort of taking in information from all of these different sources, and that's going to inform how they then support someone like me who's trying to reset my password. They also migrate information across all kinds of different tools. Again, this is very time consuming. You can think of the data entry involved when they're supporting someone like me on the end of a case. So they're trying to say, what steps have already been taken? What am I supposed to do next? And they want to have this very nicely documented. And I want you to think of all of these different things happening while they have very strict timelines that they're usually working within. Sometimes they're being evaluated on how many cases they finish per day, how quickly they resolve a case. Sometimes they're resolving multiple at the same time. It's a lot. It's a lot on your plate when you're an agent. But the thing that matters most to them and where generative AI can have the most impact is eliminating some of that bureaucratic work that they're usually faced with that really bottlenecks them actually having providing solutions to someone on the other end of the line. And we've heard it time and time again from agents that the best part of their job is feeling like they've actually helped someone at the end of the day. And someone like me, that's also what I want. I want that to happen really fast. So everyone wins in that situation. So anywhere where generative AI, or anywhere where we can reduce the sort of manual repetitive tasks is where generative AI is going to shine. In comes case summarization. So think back again, when we've had that sort of handoff process between agents. One person is transferring you to another department, I'm waiting on hold, they're putting you through to another person, and they need to figure out quickly, hey, what's already been done on this case? What am I supposed to do next? Case summarization takes all of the documentation that's been consolidated in that case so far, and it puts it into a small little card that says to the agent, hey, this is what's happened, and here's what you need to know to resolve this case. Oh, I keep wanting to do that. What's going on? And I'll zoom in a little bit, and we can walk through a couple of the human-centered AI design principles that made their way into this card. And it's a small but powerful little card. We've got a couple of different human-centered AI principles here. So the first being transparency. Agents need to know where AI has generated content so they can then go in to review it. It's important for them to know that, hey, this was generated by AI. This didn't just come from a colleague or part of the documentation in the CRM. So it's just something to say, like, just so you know, This is generative AI. We also provide, or allow them to provide the ability to give feedback by a thumbs up, thumbs down mechanism to indicate the accuracy of the output. And this is something that we then use to retrain the model and have it continually improve over time, taking their feedback into consideration. And then, of course, we have control. This is super important for agents. So being able to decide, I don't want to use this summary. It's not really that helpful to me. Or maybe there's a detail in there that I didn't expect to see that I want to override. We find it incredibly helpful for them to have that control because agents are concerned that if something goes wrong, that their name will be attached to it and it'll look poorly on their performance reviews. So that actually segues really well into the sort of inevitability of inaccuracies. So there's all kinds of different ways that generative AI can stray off the beaten path. It's not going to be a perfect experience every time. And so we had a whole study on this. And it was around the perception of inaccuracies and the sort of willingness to accept these inaccuracies in that case summarization. So whether that's it generating information that was never there before, maybe it's talking about, I don't know, a person that wasn't even involved in the case, or it's getting their name wrong, or it's missing really critical information that needs to be there. They still see the value in generative AI. They still say, hey, this will save me some time in going through all those notes. So if it makes a couple mistakes here and there, that's okay with me. And they have that willingness to accept errors as long as they remain in control. So allowing them to override it easily, looking back to that example we just saw of, having them decide, have that final say, are they going to accept or reject this output? But the biggest caveat of them all is that they need to be made aware of this. When we did this research, most agents said, I wouldn't have the confidence to point out those errors unless you told me right out of the gate that this might actually generate incorrect information. So they need a heads up. They need some sort of onboarding to say, hey, this might not be accurate 100% of the time. Please look over it. Please look over it. And that made them so much more willing to accept, so much more willing to trust these AI-generated predictions. So a couple other considerations from those research initiatives on agents is that they are not the ones responsible for AI adoption in their organization. They are not the farmers, right? They are those chefs that we were talking about. And they're not the ones that need to have those success metrics the same way that maybe someone like an admin or a developer would be. So we can spare them those details. They really just want it to be a seamless job experience. Again, remembering they've got a lot of moving parts going on. Their job is very hectic. They're just multitaskers by nature. So we don't want to add any more chaos into that already very busy experience for them. We also need to assume that they have consumer level AI knowledge. They don't need to have an AI 101 course to be able to use this tool. We want it to be intuitive, and we need to also be able to onboard them and fill in those gaps that are important for them. So again, if your summaries might contain inaccuracies, you need to tell them. You need to make sure that they're made aware of this before they start using the tool and then potentially have a bad experience where they decide, maybe I don't want to use this anymore. They lost my trust. And they might be hesitant to initially trust these outputs right out the gate as well. And that's understandable. This is new. It's something they haven't tried before. They need to be able to see it actually demonstrate that value over time and say, hey, this is actually helping me, rather than just being told that this is going to be a helpful tool. They need to make that decision for themselves. So we gave you a couple of principles of how we can do our due diligence as UX researchers in the generative AI space. But let's actually not just talk the talk, let's walk the walk. And I'll kind of review what we've done in our agent research that aligns with some of those principles. So at the very beginning, again, we leveraged research that was all being done on agents that didn't even have anything to do with generative AI. So what is that agent experience like? Have people done ethnographic studies on this before? How can we take that to identify actual pain points and then inform our product? But that's not just asking questions to our end users. It's also asking questions to our model teams and learning about potential limitations. So those conversations aren't just happening with our end users, they're also happening with our product team so we can understand, what is the model that we're working with? Are there potential risks? Is this data set have a bias that end users need to be made aware of? We need to also be having those conversations in that direction. And being the champion of our end user, concept testing is so key. We do it so many times here at ServiceNow, especially in the platform team, doing a lot of iterative concept testing across sort of different levels of fidelity and making sure we get that feedback really early and identifying those sort of moments where agents say, I'm not sure about that, or I don't know if I would use that. So really catching, when that would happen through iterative concept testing. And again, advocating for that onboarding experience and any knowledge gaps that they might have. Building their trust, prioritizing the human needs. So again, understanding what is their risk tolerance. At what point would they decide they want to stop using the tool because it's not accurate enough for them? We also need to build empathy to why they might be hesitant to adopt it. We've heard so many times that they say, well, I don't want to train this thing. It's going to take my job. I mean, I don't want it to be that good. So we have to kind of have that empathy extend in the other direction with agents and make sure that we're really building that empathy and understanding what is this impact going to have? They're the ones using it on a daily basis. And finally, last but certainly not least, is we want to make sure that AI is solving a real world problem and it's resolving an existing pain point and not just saying, we want to build AI for agents. Okay, cool. It's actually taking problems that agents face on a daily basis and trying to best address that with generative AI. So if Gen AI comes for your product, what can you do? It's not magic, right? So generative AI isn't going to just come in and magically solve all of the things that it needs to do. It's a human-built technology that is used by humans. And as user researchers, we're really good at that. We're really good at advocating for the end user, but also understanding sort of internally what are some of the limitations that maybe these users need to be made aware of. So we just need to make sure that we're not coming in and allowing it to sort of take the reins. We're doing our due diligence and understanding the risks. And this is just a sort of reminder of what we've gone over before, but just to remember to learn, be curious, ask questions, not just to your end users, but to your product teams. There are certain risks and considerations for AI that we need to be made aware of that's going to require a little bit of homework on our end as UX researchers, right? So there's all kinds of resources out there. We'll be providing some of them to you after the session. A couple off the top of my head, the Coursera generative AI courses and AI foundational courses are fantastic. But at least understanding the landscape of data, bias, risk, and just the overall state of technology, this is going to make your job so much easier for advocating for the user so you can have the terminology to really equip yourself with when you're in those conversations with your product teams. You also need to learn the mental models of your end user, right? So going back to that farmer and that chef example, there's going to be very different expectations and needs on who you're building for. And you need to learn that language of who your end user is and make sure that you're meeting them where they are and you're not assuming anything of where their AI knowledge is at the moment. And you need to communicate that. You're an advocate. You're in those product teams and you're saying, hey, remember, there's going to be someone that uses this at the end of the day, and we need to make sure that this matches their level of expertise. Also, we need to recognize and share consequences if an AI is inaccurate. This can be a little bit of an awkward conversation, I think, for some of us, but it's one that we really need to have because it's going to have a very rippling impact to our end users. So really speaking up and being brave in those conversations and saying, hey, there's someone that's using this. We need to think of the consequences if something is inaccurate. And again, earning their trust and building it over time through onboarding, through clear communication, and through being really transparent to end users about the limitations. And last but not least, ensure that AI is solving a real world problem. So making sure that this is actually something that we're not just making users use because it's the fun new thing, that it's actually something that is driving value for them and solving a real world pain point. And that's really where we have a fantastic seat at the table right now. UX researchers can help advocate for when AI solves a real problem and isn't just the fun, trendy thing to lay on top of all of our enterprise products. So it's best for us to advocate for to better meet end users' needs and to recognize when AI might not be the best solution because it isn't always the one. And that's it. Thank you, guys.